Although the year started off well for my boating adventures, especially the month of May, after my chill out in Loch Buie, the weather started to deteriorate, with long spells of wet and windy weather. So much so that I returned to using my small F-rib and its 6 horsepower outboard for day trips in my local waters of Loch Etive, when conditions allowed. I worked the loch when I could, collecting driftwood from its shores to keep the home fires burning over next winter. The summer months give plenty time to let it dry out completely. The wood is mostly wind-blown from trees and not been floating for weeks on end in salt water, so it's perfectly good for my wood stove. Not only that, but I've been slowly filling my deep freeze with enough pink flesh fish to last through the summer months. The loch has been very productive for me this year, which I presume is because of all the wet weather arriving after the long dry months of May. The fish are now well dispersed, so much harder to find and catch than they were a few weeks ago, which is why I'm late posting my latest video. I didn't want to advertise the fact there were large shoals of easy-to-catch, tasty fish around. All the fish that I keep are over 12 inches long, which is illegal to keep size. Anything less than 12 inches are returned safely to grow bigger. And I don't fish for them on a Sunday, which is also an obscure but legal requirement. I don't consider myself a fisherman, just an old guy who loves eating tasty fish. So I'm not teaching anyone how or where I get them. There are plenty real fishermen around who will happily reveal the correct methods. I will say I love them pan-fried or better still, wrapped in tinfoil and oven-cooked with some butter, lemon, salt and pepper to taste. Yum yum. However, without doubt, my favourite way of scoffing them is to land as soon as I've caught one. Clean it and cook it as soon as possible after stopping swimming, and before rigor mortis has time to set in. You can't get a fresher fish than that. When it's cooked to perfection, the pink flesh just falls from the bone, and I can't think of a better way to start the day than eating a fresh cooked trout for breakfast, then swirling it down the hatch and into my stomach with a steaming hot mug of coffee. It was a nice day near the start of May when I first set out looking for the pink flesh fish. I went by my small F-rib and 6 horsepower outboard. It was lovely seeing the countryside in its verdant green shades, after seeing it so often in its drab yellow and brown winter colours. I was full of the joys of spring and very hopeful of catching my first fish of the year as I headed for the promised land. I was in no hurry, so sometimes paused to admire familiar sights as I made my way up the calm sea loch. My plan was to stop for coffee at the wee out-the-way bay where I often camp, and then head off trawling a fishing lure. My heart sank a little as I spotted the coos that crap where I pitched the tent, not far from where I camp. I feared the worst. And sure enough, they had left their mark around the hallowed ground where I sleep. Fortunately, I hadn't planned camping there at this time. I had my coffee while admiring the sea pinks and other wild flowers, while listening to some cuckoos calling for their mates. And then I was off again. I was heading for Trilican Point. Not that it's a particularly good place for fish, but I knew the bluebells would be out and the sight of them would catch my attention, hook, line and sinker. Scottish bluebells, often known as the flower of remembrance, always remind me of my late mother. Every year in the latter part of her life, we went walking together to admire them in our local woodlands when they come into bloom. I have found Trilican Point is possibly the best place to see them on the shores of Loch Etive. so I was delighted not to miss them this year, as they don't bloom forever. And then I happily continued on my way. Fishing was a bit dour as I headed for the far end of the loch, but eventually my patience paid off, and I caught my first pink flesh fish of the year. It was around 12 inches long, just. But as it was my first fish of the season, I kept it and scoffed it when I get home. It was the sweetest tasting fish ever. At the end of the loch, a drone was at board catching little. It headed off for a scout around the area. As you can see from my videos, Loch Etive is surrounded by hills, and these hills seem to attract a lot of rain. The rain runs down the hillside and flash floods and enters the sea loch. The freshwater rain is more buoyant than the dense salt water of the sea, so although Loch Etive is a sea loch, its top few feet are mostly freshwater, which is why there's a healthy population of small brown trout in the loch. These brownies then head to sea, where the feeding is much better and return as sea trout. I enjoy eating both brown and sea trout, as they are the same fish, with a lovely tasty firm pink flesh. When the drone returned, I slowly started heading back down the loch, still trawling my lure, and to my delight and a lovely brown trout's dismay, I caught my second fish of the day. I ate well for the next 2 suppers. For info only, the 2 rods that I use most were given to me by my late father, and he got them from his grandfather. So I have caught a fish or 3 over 3 generations of my family. Although the reel is only 10 years old, and I now use modern braid line instead of monofilament, I attached my lure with 5-pound breaking strain nylon. I didn't carry a landing net on this occasion, but later on, when the main fish run was in full flow, I started to carry one. After all, I didn't want to lose a lovely large fish lifting it directly from the water, as I had to do in this instance. Mid-May brought a lovely spell of weather, and I headed out to sea, so didn't get fishing again until the last week of May. Strong winds and rain kept me away from the sea, but on the occasional dry day I headed out fishing again. The main sea trout runs had begun, and I wanted to get a few for the freezer to tide me over the leaner months. It saves my money buying Tesco fish. Ah well, I can't land them all, and some were a bit too small, so we returned to fight another day. If I'm putting them back, I try my best not to touch the fish, as I suspect my greasy hands would give them a scale rash, so I shake them off the hook without pawing them. And another one gets away. Its momentum shaking its head gets the lure out its lips, so I try my best not to wind them in too fast, which causes them to jump. Some days it was wet and windy, so I stayed not far from where I launched the boat, and where I was in a bit of shelter from the blustery southwest winds. The weather didn't stop the fish biting. In fact, I think it was the heavy rains after such a long dry May that attracted so many fish in at once. They were shoaling like mackerel. This nice fish dinner tried its best to escape by hiding under the boat, but I got it in the end. It put up such a brave fight, I felt a little sorry for it and considered letting it go again. However, greed got the better of me, and later when I scoffed it, I was glad I didn't put it back, as it was absolutely delicious. I terminate their life as humanely and as quickly as I can. I don't let them suffocate, nor do I whack them repeatedly in the head. A quick insertion of the point of a sharp knife between the eyes and into the brain, and they know little more. So it's not like the supermarket fish, hauled out the North Sea in a trawler's net and left to suffocate in the boat's hold. Which is probably what happened to that tasty fish supper you enjoyed the last time you were at the Chippy. When I first hooked this fish, I thought it was the biggest yet. It was turning the boat and almost pulling it towards the shore. My heart was racing as the water was too deep to see it. But then it started to give up the fight, and I realised it was not a tasty pink-fleshed fish, but a watery, tasteless, white-fleshed pollock. So, though I was a bit disappointed, I'm quite sure the pollock was delighted as I let it go again. I'm happy to say it's the only pollock that got a sore lip from me this time around. As mentioned earlier, I have been waiting until the shoals of trout have dispersed before uploading the video. I'm not saying there are no decent pink-fleshed fish left in the loch, but you'll have to work for them, trying to find where they have gone. Meanwhile, I have the bottom drawer of my freezer full of fish suppers until I can get a few more. To finish this video, here are some views of the loch towards Connell Bridge and the Falls of Laura. Although I didn't get any fish under the bridge, I enjoyed playing in the current in my wee Ephraim. I'm afraid that weather in both June and now July has been abysmal for small boats, which is why there have been few videos from me lately. However, the fishing has been good. Thanks for watching.